Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a story that's probably in your wallet right now, but its origins are far more dramatic than you might think. We're talking about paper money, and specifically how its invention in China over 1,000 years ago led to an economic roller coaster that nearly brought an entire empire to its knees. Before paper, what did people use for money? Well, for centuries in China, it was all about coins. Heavy, clunky bronze and iron coins. Imagine being a wealthy merchant in the Tang Dynasty, around the 9th century. You've just sold a massive shipment of silk. How do you get paid? Not with a simple bank transfer. You'd get paid in literal tons of coins. We talking cartloads of metal that were a nightmare to transport and even more dangerous to store. Robbers loved these coin convoys. This inconvenience sparked a brilliant idea among those merchants. They started leaving their heavy coins with a trusted agent. In return, they'd get a piece of paper, a note, promising that this paper was worth a certain amount of coins. It was basically an IOU. These notes were called flying money because they were so light and could fly across the country compared to the crawling pace of coin-filled wagons. It was a private merchant-led innovation, built entirely on trust. If you trusted the agent who issued the note, you'd accept it as payment. This was the ancestor of the banknote, born out of pure necessity. For a while, this system worked beautifully within the merchant community. But then, the government saw an opportunity. The Song dynasty in the 11th century, particularly in the region of Sichuan, was facing a severe metal shortage. They needed iron for their military, but it was all tied up in coins. So the government stepped in. They took over the private note issuing system and created the world's first official government-backed paper money called Joazi. Initially, the government was careful. They issued a limited number of these notes and, crucially, promised they were fully backed by metal coins. You could, in theory, walk into a government office and exchange your paper Joazi for a specific amount of real hard cash. This promise was the bedrock of public trust. People accepted the paper because they believed in the government's guarantee. For the first time in history, an entire region was running on a state-controlled paper currency. It was revolutionary. It fueled commerce, made trade easier, and was a massive success. But with great power comes great temptation. The government soon realized something incredible. They could print money whenever they needed it. Got a war to finance? Print more money. Need to fund a massive construction project? Just fire up the printing presses. This was way easier than collecting taxes or mining more metal. At first they were cautious. But as military pressures from northern invaders like the Jurchens and later the Mongols mounted, the Song dynasty's expenses skyrocketed. The temptation became irresistible. They started printing more and more Joazi, far beyond the amount of metal reserves they had in their vaults. This is where the story takes a dark turn. Let's say the government had 1 million coins in reserve but printed 10 million notes. Suddenly, each note is only backed by a fraction of its face value. People weren't stupid. They started to notice that there were a lot more notes floating around. They'd go to exchange their paper for coins, only to be told, "Sorry, we're a bit short today. Come back later." Confidence began to crumble. A piece of paper is only valuable if everyone believes it is. Once that belief falters, it's just paper. Prices for everyday goods started to skyrocket. What cost 1 banknote last month might cost 10 this month. This is the classic definition of hyperinflation. People's life savings, held in paper money, were being wiped out. They'd rush to spend their money as soon as they got it, buying anything tangible, rice, land, tools, before their cash became even more worthless. The economy was thrown into chaos. The Song dynasty eventually collapsed, not solely because of paper money, but the monetary chaos certainly didn't help. The next dynasty, the Yuan, founded by Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, took the idea of paper money and ran with it on a national scale. The Yuan dynasty was the first in the world to use paper money as its primary currency across the entire empire. Marco Polo, The famous Venetian traveler was absolutely stunned when he saw this. He wrote in his book about how the Great Khan could basically create wealth out of nothing using the bark of mulberry trees. In Europe, this was an alien concept. The Yuan learned from the Song's mistakes, at least for a while. They established a new paper currency called the Chow. They tried to control the supply and maintain its value. But history has a funny way of repeating itself. They started printing with reckless abandon. It was a fiat currency, valuable simply because the emperor decreed it was. And if you refused to accept it, the punishment could be death. But you can't force belief. The value of the Chow plummeted. By the mid-14th century, the yuan monetary system had completely collapsed. This economic meltdown was a major factor contributing to the widespread revolts that eventually overthrew the yuan and established the Ming dynasty. They saw firsthand how it had wrecked to previous dynasties. They tried to reintroduce it, but eventually gave up and reverted primarily to a system based on silver. For the next several centuries, China largely abandoned the grand experiment of paper money that it had pioneered. The trauma of hyperinflation ran deep. So what's the takeaway from this incredible story? It shows that paper money is a double-edged sword. It's a powerful tool that can lubricate an economy and fuel prosperity. But it's also a fragile system built on a single crucial element: trust. When a government honors that trust and manages the money supply responsibly, it works. But when it abuses its power to print money to solve its problems, it can lead to economic ruin, social unrest, and even the collapse of empires. The struggles China faced with inflation and currency debasement 1,000 years ago are the very same issues that central banks and governments around the world grapple with today. It's a timeless lesson about power, temptation, and the delicate nature of money itself. The next time you pull a bill out of your wallet, remember it's long. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this story interesting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments what other historical topics you'd like to see covered. I'll see you in the next one.